how should everyone here think about stupid risk, intelligent risk, or however you would describe risk? Because, I mean, we get paid, I think, relative to what we are willing to take on, relative to the risk, which could be misconstrued as let's make crazy-ass, judgments.
Good. Risk doesn't cease to exist just because you ignore it. One of the smartest investors in the world today, who Warren Buffett stops what he's doing to read what this man has to say. This is the only guy that Warren says, when Howard Marks talks, I listen. Howard Marks has written a book. You should own this book and you should read it soon. Probably after you read The Road Less Stupid. But then again, I'm biased. If my kids asked me which one they should read first, I'd point them to Howard Marks. So read Howard Marks first. Howard Marks runs a company called Oaktree Financial, and he's written a book called The Most Important Thing. The Most Important Thing. He says a lot of brilliant things. 3 that I'm going to mention. Number 1, the less risk you perceive, the more risk there is. Which is completely counterintuitive to the way most of us think. If I perceive that there's no risk of having an automobile accident between my home and the grocery store, then I won't put on my seatbelt. I'll text while I'm driving. I'll be talking on the phone and watching a video, and as a result of perceiving there's no risk, risk skyrocketed. The way you lose money is by perceiving there's no risk. I'm a natural. I've got all this money. These are smart people. If it doesn't work out, I still got a lot more. I mean, what could go wrong? And so we begin to think in terms of, we say stupid stuff. Everybody in here has done it. I've done it. We say stupid stuff like, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. This is intergalactically stupid. This is unbelievably ignorant. The greater the risk, the greater the probability of a loss. But we say, oh yeah, I mean, it's risky. But, I mean, the reward, my God, the upside is so huge. We've done this. You and I were talking about this. Warren Buffett was playing golf. This is a true story. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are playing golf. They're best friends. There's with 2 other guys. They get to a par 3, which is the only kind of hole you can legitimately make a hole-in-one on. They get to a par 3, and one of Warren's playing partners, right as Warren was about to hit his tee shot, the playing partner said, Warren, let's have a bet on this hole. Warren said, okay, what's the bet? The guy said, $2. I bet you $2 that you don't hit a hole-in-one. And Warren said, well, like, what if no, it's $20. I'll bet you $20. And Warren said, okay, $20. If I got to give you $20 if I don't hit a hole-in-one. And Warren said, if I do hit a hole-in-one, how much will you give me? The guy said, I'll give you $20,000, which is 1,000 to 1 odds. That's what that is. So if Warren loses, if Warren doesn't hit a hole-in-one, he has to give his playing partner $20. But if he does hit a hole-in-one, then his playing partner's got to give him $20,000. And Warren looked at this and said, no bet. And the guy said, why? Warren said, Well, I mean, the odds of me hitting a hole in one are not 1,000 to 1, it's 10,000 to 1. If I stood up here and hit 10,000 golf balls, there might be one that goes in the hole. But if I only hit 1,000 golf balls, the likelihood of one going in the hole, never going to happen. So I'm not going to take the bet. And the guy looked at Warren and said, Warren, it's $20. Last year, you made $5.6 billion. It's $20. And Warren said, I know. Stupid in small things, stupid in big things. Write that down. Write that down. What's sabotaging us is the small things sometimes. So this idea of risk doesn't cease to exist, that the less risk we perceive, the more risk there is. Howard Marks, in his book, said, a house that can withstand a hurricane is indistinguishable from a house that cannot withstand a hurricane until after the hurricane. And what we want to be doing is building houses, financial empires that can withstand a hurricane. I mean, for crying out loud, if you know that the economy does this and nobody can predict it, I mean, you know, there's the soothsayers out there. Somebody told me one time, the reason God made economists is to make astrologers look good, right? The whole idea that somebody can predict what's about to happen, I mean, they can smell, you know, but nobody knows how big or severe or anything like that. They just know it goes in cycles. And what I want to do as a business owner is build a world-class defense to go with my world-class offense. As CEOs, as leaders, as owners, what most of us have done is built world-class offenses. And so we're always going long. I'm probably the only one here that did this, but when I was a kid, the guys would get in the front, I'm talking about a kid, like 7, 8 years, 10 years old, and we'd be playing football and in the front yard, and there'd be a quarterback, and he'd draw on his hand. He'd say, all right, now you do this, and you do that, and everybody'd look at me and say, Keith, you go long, right? That means you just run, and we're just going to heave the ball down there. It's going to be a Hail Mary, and maybe we'll get lucky. And that's how oftentimes we run our businesses, is relying on hope and luck. My dad told me years ago, Keith, you can rely on the rabbit's foot if you want, but it didn't do much for the rabbit. And that's kind of true, right? You have to kind of think about, where am I relying on hope and luck as opposed to being thoughtful? And being thoughtful would say, is there something that could go wrong? And asking that question and building a defense so that you can live to survive another day, which I didn't do when I was 40, right, which is why I lost all that money. Yep. Right? It was all offense. Plus it was arrogant. Plus it was hubris. I had a exhaust pipe in my mouth, and I was just inhaling my own fumes. Mm-hmm. I told somebody one time, I was 38 years old. I told somebody one time, I was being interviewed, and they said, Keith, how would you describe yourself? And I said, this shows you how screwed up I was, okay? I'm not proud to say this. I said, I'm a little bit like Halley's Comet. A guy like me only comes around about once every 70 or 80 years. That's how good I am at business. And that was right before nose down into the dirt, right? All right, here's the final thought on risk. It's better to ensure survival under negative outcomes than it is to predict success under favorable ones.
Say that again.
It's better to ensure survival under negative outcomes than it is to predict success under favorable ones. And so this way of thinking, you mentioned it a second ago, the 3 questions. What's the upside? And we tend to be experts at the upside because we're optimistic and we can see the opportunity. What's the upside? What's the downside, which we tend to not be that good at? We rarely ask that question, and if we do, we kind of minimize it. It's kind of like what most of us do with our competition. Most of us with our competition minimize our, yeah, I got some competition, but nobody's really doing it. I mean, I'm different. I mean, I've got, that is about the craziest thing. Let me ask you a question. I'm opening another tab. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. How much money could you charge for your product or service if you had no competition? How many customers would you have if you had no competition? I already know your answers. If you had no competition, you could charge whatever you wanted and you'd have all the customers. So what dictates your revenue is your competition. And how you position and message against your competition. I think that the same thing is true with risk, the downside. How do I need to think about the downside and be realistic with it? And if the downside happened, then can I live with it? And one of the most powerful tools I've found in this is called a premortem. A premortem. You know what a postmortem is. A postmortem is, somebody dies, they crack them open, they look around, say, how'd they die? Well, their heart stopped, they stopped breathing, blah, blah, blah. That's how they died. A premortem says, I'm about to make a decision. I'm going to project myself 1 year into the future, and by projecting myself 1 year in the future, I'm going to look back over the course of the last year, and this decision I'm just about to make has turned into a dumpster fire. This thing is a train wreck. It is a mess. So 1 year into the future, I'm now thinking, as I'm looking back, it's a mess. A premortem says, what are all the things that went wrong that caused this thing to turn out to be screwed up? If you will exercise this muscle, which is defense, on premortems, on identifying and evaluating, minimizing risk. It's questioning assumptions, losing some of the optimism. My God, we're optimistic. We're irrationally optimistic about the initiatives and ideas that we have, and I think one of the best ways to play defense, honestly, is with what you're doing with this and some of the work I'm doing with the boards that we have, which gives business owners an opportunity to have people around them that will give them advice and tell them no. Yeah, ask yourself the question, how many people do you have right now, that can tell you no? That will question your assumptions, that will push you back on some of the ideas. Most of us don't have people around us that will do that. In fact, the vast majority of business owners don't have that, and so it's why they say leadership is so lonely. And it is, because we don't have people around us that'll push. You look at the most successful businesses on the planet. Every one of them has a board, and every one of those boards meets once a quarter. There's a reason for that. That board is not there to inject the CEO with adrenaline. That board is there to say, whoa, cowboy, slow down just a little bit. Just a little bit. Let's think this thing through. What are the second order consequences? What could go wrong? Do we have a plan that ensures success, or at the very least ensures survival? Or are we going all in?